Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Stanley. I'm the integrator here at Step Up IT Services. We're a managed service provider and technology partner located in Eugene, Oregon. I'm joined today by Caitlin Allen. She's one of the VCIOs we have here at Step Up, and we're going to talk a little bit about budgeting for IT hardware. Caitlin, I think the first question for you is what role can you, as a VCIO here at Step Up, play when helping a client create their IT hardware budget?
Hey, Nicole. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. That's a really good question. A technology partner's role in hardware budgeting is almost the entire process of hardware budgeting. An effective VCIO should be identifying the existing equipment in a client network, planning the hardware refresh projects for each device, and accounting for new hardware needs. The burden small to medium-sized businesses face when it comes to planning hardware budgeting should be gone if they have a technology partner. All a client should need to do is confirm the accuracy of the data, bring new business needs to the table, and get the budget approved internally by executive leadership once all information has been verified and they've gone through their processes on their end.
Okay, so I think you hit on a really important point. An effective VCIO actually manages the entire process for their clients. It's not just that they answer questions and point the clients in the right direction. It's that they're actually holding their hand the whole way, walking them down the path, starting from the time the need or problem is identified. So knowing that, what would you say is the primary objective when developing an IT hardware budget?
I would say that's planning for expenditures well in advance and making sure the projects being approved meet the current needs of the business. Obviously, preparing for any type of project is definitely the recommendation.
Okay, so and then what about as business needs change? I mean, does the budget get updated? And since most businesses are operating on annual budgets, is there a good way to prioritize IT hardware, especially when things might change over the course of the year or the budgetary period?
Absolutely. The budget is a living document between myself and my clients. For example, if there's a need for an impromptu PC replacement that was not originally in the technology budget for the year, I would work with my client to pull the funds from their contingency budget to get the end user up and running as the number one priority. Once the immediate need has been addressed, I would update the living budget document to reflect a new hardware refresh date for the new machine and remove any reference to the device no longer in the client environment. It's very important to be flexible when it comes to a client's technology budget. You don't want a client to be unable to function because something has happened in their environment that wasn't planned, and things do happen. The highest priorities when it comes to hardware budgeting are always dependent on the client's business. So if data is critical to the business, contains sensitive information, or has compliance requirements, the hardware housing that data is the highest priority to budget for. So that would typically include equipment for that hardware by just association.
So more on that then, I think people are concerned with how to set a budget for the unexpected, but while also not missing out on those planned upgrades and refresh cycles. So what about other IT hardware that can be sort of deprioritized to give room to critical infrastructure? Things like monitors, keyboards. If those are included in the IT hardware budget, would they be good to hold off should something else come up in the meantime?
Many MSPs don't have scheduled refresh rates for hardware such as monitors, keyboards, mice, etc., as they can be used for extended periods of time without failure and are very easy to replace in general. So these items typically have low impact when they stop functioning and are inexpensive items to replace on the fly.
Would you ever recommend used equipment when building an IT hardware budget if a client was looking to save some money?
New is always preferred over used equipment, as new hardware often comes with hardware warranty, vendor support at the time of purchase. That allows for replacements of those devices without additional unforeseen costs down the road to go through a return process, etc. Purchasing new equipment will also minimize the risk associated with gray market devices. So when clients purchase used or refurbished equipment to try to cut costs, they are often purchasing equipment from untrusted third-party resellers. It can be a huge security risk once the hardware enters the company's production network. Licensing isn't really safe either. I have had clients try to purchase inexpensive licensing through an untrusted third-party reseller, only to discover that the product keys are invalid, for example, or they've already been used by another user. So at the end of the day, paying a premium upfront to have something done the right way will save a client money in the long run, especially when you consider time spent returning equipment and licensing that doesn't work, repurchasing the correct items, workflow impacts if those items are needed by a specific date.
Several years ago, here at Step Up, we had a lot of success in getting remarketed hardware from vendors like HP, especially when a client had a need for higher specs than their budget could cover on the new equipment, or even when faced with delays for the supply chain or procurement on that new equipment. Any thoughts, or how do you feel about vendor certified refurbished hardware? Can it help bridge that gap between client needs and supply chain or budget issues?
Especially with COVID and supply chain, obviously we saw a lot of need for flexible solutions to those types of problems. Making sure equipment is available by the time the client needs it is still up in the air at times. If a client requires something very particular to function and the hardware is on back order for months, it becomes an immediate challenge. Sometimes we have to downgrade or upgrade our usual hardware recommendations to meet a project timeline. This whole process requires a professional's eyes to ensure the alternate equipment will meet the project outcomes, just as the original recommendation would have. Fortunately for our clients, MSPs are full of experts in the trade that can pivot when they need to and work out a new solution based on product availability.
How do you help clients kind of filter through all of the new and flashy stuff that you might see plastered all over the internet from the true business needs, especially when that new and flashy stuff might be the more accessible or more readily available?
In an ideal world, new hardware would always mean increased speed for end users to work more effectively, for example. However, when a client is being proactive in budgeting their new technology hardware, efficiency also means preventing downtime due to hardware failures, security incidents, slowness due to outdated hardware builds, etc. Flashier isn't always better, and I think that's what a lot of business owners tend to associate, especially when they get into that mindset. So it's important to focus on projects that fill a specific need to the business rather than spending money on projects that serve very little purpose to the business, but feel like a fun, new, interesting thing to do.
As we're kind of talking here, I realize that we haven't really addressed why it's important to replace your hardware, or why you would even need a budget to replace hardware if it hasn't in fact actually failed yet. What would be the implication of not having an IT hardware plan or budget, other than the inefficiencies that slower equipment might cause for users or their security concerns?
Old aged hardware and end of life systems are both huge risks in a technical environment. Equipment that is 5 years or older typically is far more likely to experience hardware failure. So depending on the impact of each specific device to the company's operations, downtime due to hardware failure could be anywhere from a minor annoyance to a severe hit to the company's bottom line. So the security risk comes into play when we're talking about outdated devices that are not patched or running end-of-life operating systems. Bad actors find new ways into computer systems every single day. So when a device isn't being patched or isn't supported by the vendor anymore, even a single device can be a huge target for taking down a whole client environment. I would say most of the questions I get from clients regarding hardware surrounds the need for new hardware in the first place. So often the people approving the budget at a company are not the people who understand why the upgrades and refreshes of technical equipment are necessary. This means the VCIO plays a huge part in educating clients on what these systems are, how they function, and what the impact is to the company if these systems are not proactively maintained.
I think the idea of a VCIO is still new enough that some people might not understand the bigger picture role of having that type of partnership or support. So kind of in addition to everything we've already talked about, tell us a little bit about the budgeting process that you kind of go through as the VCIO. Do you have a different process that you use when budgeting CapEx versus OpEx?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Capital expenditures require a much more proactive approach. For example, completing a cost-benefit analysis is often required just to justify the need for these types of projects in the first place. These projects also tend to focus on overarching company objectives rather than routine projects for repairing or replacing equipment, for example. A great example of CapEx project would be a company moving from on-premises servers to a cloud-hosted environment. Typically, a need for this type of project is identified well in advance of the project itself and produces a future benefit of some kind for the company. And then operational expenditures would be more of your day-to-day expenses and require much less active engagement with a client to budget for. MSPs are in and of themselves an OpEx line item for our technology budget, as our support staff maintain the existing technical environment and ensure operations continue as normal. This budget would also include recurring expenses such as line of business applications and licensing costs, security subscriptions, backup costs, etc.
And when it comes to actually laying the budget out itself, who's responsible for negotiating with vendors for best pricing? Is it something that you do as a VCIO, or is it normally something the clients would do themselves, just kind of with the plan that you guys have created together?
It is better to have the MSP handling the price negotiations due to the discounts and benefits that can be received from just economies of scale. MSPs also have great vendor partnerships, typically with technology resellers, which ensures the client gets a great price and product is readily available. It makes sense for the client to negotiate pricing if they maybe have a way of getting a better rate than the MSP would. For example, local government agencies and nonprofit organizations are often eligible for discounted licensing and hardware. So depending on the relationship with the MSP and the ease of procuring the materials, a client may want to take the price negotiation on themselves. Hardware vendors are your best friends, really, when it comes to budgeting. Vendor relationships are incredibly important to maintain because they could mean the difference between having a positive or negative outcome for your client project. Hardware vendors are also there to answer any questions, confirm product availability, and notify us of the best deals on hardware. So that typically means that the client gets cost-effective hardware that is delivered on time and meets all the project requirements, which is always great.
Yeah, it means happy clients. And our company purpose is happy clients. For anybody out there that doesn't know, Step Up, our purpose is happy clients. It's really what we do here. So with that, I would really like to wrap this up. But before we go, I'd like you to have the opportunity to let everybody know what you enjoy about being a VCIO and getting the opportunity to work with clients and building out something like a IT hardware budget.
Yes, absolutely. I love that question. I always love working with clients who have never had a clear budgeting process in place before. So part of what I love is just seeing the relief on all of their faces and on the faces of the staff who no longer need to take on this burden. It's very rewarding for me. Budgeting for hardware feels very difficult or unnecessary when you aren't looking at the budget through a technical lens per se. So having an expert available to address your concerns, plan, and educate the rest of your company can go a long way for an organization. The reward for the client is not necessarily having to deal with the stress or fear that something will be missed, for example. So bringing that type of value to the table as an outside partner is just priceless, and it makes my whole job feel worthwhile, really.
You've been really fantastic, Caitlin. Thank you for taking the time to sit with me here. For everybody that doesn't know, we're here on a Sunday morning, just kind of enjoying our virtual coffee together. And we've covered a lot in this conversation, and I'm sure there are many people out there that have had some of their burning questions answered. So again, thank you, Caitlin. And until the next one, thank you everyone for letting us take you on this IT hardware budget journey. And if the idea of a VCIO excites you and you'd like to learn more about what we do here at Step Up IT, give us a call, shoot us an email, or reach out on LinkedIn. We'd love to chat.